Hey all, it's Tony Volpicello here, host of The Career Jigsaw. Today we're featuring an Encore episode from back in Season 1. In So Tell Me About Yourself, we take a deep dive into interviews from the candidate perspective. Now more than ever, especially in this competitive job market, the interview is critical. It's no surprise, since it is the number one decision point for recruiters and hiring managers. So maybe it's time for you to invest some time here. Without further delay, here is So Tell Me About Yourself.
We got all things situated. The mathematics were calculated. I feel wasted and I feel jaded. The process here is so complicated. 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Let's stay focused on a new.
If you need to improve your interview confidence, or you're looking for ways to be better prepared for interviews, well, you've come to the right place. It's Tony again, and welcome back to the Career Jigsaw Podcast. So I have a question I need you to always ask yourself early in the process. How bad do I want this job? Because in my experience, if you don't want it that bad, this will show in the interview. You might think you're faking it well, but trust me, you aren't. I've been on both ends, and in the end, passion can't be faked. So you might do yourself more harm than good by applying for a job you don't want. And this is different from applying for a job that you don't think you're going to get. And we'll talk about the benefits of what I call stretch applying in future episodes. But again, I want to reinforce, make sure you ask yourself the question, you give yourself the reality check, do I really want this job? So I said end-to-end interview process. What do I mean? Well, the interview process has 3 distinct opportunities to impress. What you do before the interview, what you clearly do during the interview, and also what you do after the interview. All 3 are chances to impress, chances to make an impression. Why waste any of them? So let's talk about what you can do prior to the interview. To me, there are 2 things that could impress prior to the interview even happening. First would be you do your homework. And this includes research on the role, research on the company, site visits to the company, background on the interviewers. You could look them up on LinkedIn or Instagram to really understand them better. You could also experience the company. Are you a customer of the company? If not, maybe you can become one during the pre-interview process. And then lastly, in homework, don't neglect a dry run of the interview logistics. Drive to the office where the interview is going to be, or make sure your Zoom is set up if it's a virtual meeting. Leave none of that to chance. And then second, you can engage the interviewers prior to the interview. Nothing wrong with a quick note, mailing your resume to make sure they have the freshest color copy of it, and maybe even submitting an action plan of what you would do if you had the role as part of that package you send in to engage the interviewer. It could be very impressive to make a first impression on the interviewer or interviewers prior to the interview. So don't neglect that piece. So now let's talk about what you can do during the interview. So now for my hack. So let's review the 3 categories of interview questions there are and how to answer them. This hack takes all the types of interview questions and puts them into one of 3 buckets. The first bucket, well, this question is tell me about you. It's usually the first question you get in an interview. It's the smallest bucket. It's a broad question. And the way to answer this question, which we'll talk about in a minute, is to take the listener on a journey. Second set of questions sound like tell me how or tell me why. These are behavioral questions or questions designed to figure out what motivates you. And here's where you'll employ the 3-answer method. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then the third bucket sounds like tell me about a time. So these are situational questions, and we'll talk through how to describe the situation, review your actions against the situation, and then share what the outcome was. So let's go back to the first bucket. Tell me about you. This is a general, wide open question. Tell me about yourself. It's more of an icebreaker. This is your chance to open strong. Think of it as a quick journey. You should have this answer memorized. So you'll summarize your resume, your work experience, and a bit of your life. So when you get asked, tell me a little bit about you, the goal here is to quickly describe you, where you come from, and what makes you tick. Now, don't go back too far. Don't start at birth. Nobody cares about middle school. Touch on your education. Review your career highlights. Weave in your strengths. And then it's okay to add some personal stuff here too. It keeps it human. Here's what it could sound like. So I graduated from Forest University, landed my first job at ABC Company. Here are the few roles that I've had along the way. Here are the strengths I've developed, which led me to my role today. And oh, by the way, here's what else makes me tick outside of work. It is a great way to start the interview. So one example of a tell me how question could sound like, wow, your performance over the last 3 years has been excellent. How did you do that? Or, I see your office has strong client satisfaction scores. What's the key? So the first key here for you is to listen and understand what type of question the interview is asking. These sound like they're asking, how did you do that? If this is the case, always think about the type of question requiring 3 answers. Train your brain to give 3 answers, almost like it's a multiple choice question. I call this the 3-answer method. So this is what it sounds like. My question: how have you achieved such sustained performance in your current role? And now my answer. Well, there are 3 things that are important to me in sustaining great performance. First, I start every client interaction with asking key questions so I fully understand their current situation and needs. Second, I take notes with every client so I don't forget any details. And then third, I schedule a future appointment with my client so we always pick up where we left off. There is so much power in 3 answers. It shows you have a specific, repeatable process, and it's thorough. And then you can assess the interviewer body language to gauge whether or not you should elaborate even further. But I'm telling you, this 3-answer approach will give you so much confidence, will give you a head start in answering the question, and will help you answer the question thoroughly. So that was an example of tell me how. Now let's just talk through a tell me why question. So you may hear something like, well, tell me why you want to join this company. And again, 3 answers. So you can start with, well, there's 3 reasons why I want to join this company. First reason, the career opportunities seem absolutely endless. Second, the corporate culture really aligns with my values. And then third, the company is spread out so wide geographically that the sky seems like the limit in terms of career opportunities. That's why I want to join this company. Okay, so we talked about the first question being a little bit broad and tell me about you. And that's the question that you answer with a journey. There's the second bucket of questions, which are tell me how or tell me why, which you answer with 3 answers, the recipe. So now let's get into the third type of question, which could be more situational or behavioral. These questions usually start with tell me about a time. And the goal of the question here is to draw out your past experience. So keep in mind, the interviewer is looking for an example. Be specific. Or this question could be more hypothetical, like, tell me what you would do if. So the challenge here is trying to understand, well, what is the goal of this question? So I'll give you an example of a question I asked regularly in my interviews. Tell me about a time you failed and what did you learn from it? And in this question, I was trying to see if the interviewee can learn from mistakes. So it's a little hard in the moment to try to understand what the motivation of the question is, but if you can get your head there, it can ensure you are selecting the right example. But again, what I was trying to do is assess if this candidate can be self-reflective, because I am a very strong believer that you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So the third question you can get in an interview could be more situational or behavioral. These questions usually start with, tell me about a time. And the goal here of the question is to draw out your experience. So really think about that. The interviewer is trying to see whether or not you've got experience doing this thing, whatever it is. That's why they're asking you to tell me about a time. They're looking for an example. Keep that in mind. They want to hear something specific. So the challenge here is trying to understand in real time what the goal of the question is. So I'll give you an example of a question I asked regularly in my interviews. The question was, tell me about a time you failed and what did you learn from it? And in this question, I was trying to see whether or not this candidate could learn from their mistakes. That's hard in the moment to assess, but the goal here of the question was to draw out experience where you can make a mistake and learn from it. Because I am a strong believer that you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So I want to hear an example of that. So if you can quickly assess, okay, this is the type of question I'm being asked, now let me answer it, you're well on your way. And again, if you can do this real time during the interview, it will help you select the right powerful example to share with the interviewer. So now how to answer that question. So here's what I want you to think about. This is part of the hack, part of a framework. I want you to think about the answer to this question as situation, action, and outcome. You're going to describe the situation. You're going to tell them what action you took, and you're going to round it out with the home run. Here was the outcome. So again, what does this sound like? So my question, tell me about a time you failed and how did you handle it? So here's the situation, here's the action I took, and here's the outcome. So describe the situation. Don't assume the interviewer knows everything about the situation, so be a little specific, but don't be long. Just tee it up so it's clear. So what could this sound like? So I started in a new role as a manager of a branch, and within the first few weeks, we failed an audit. So simply put, that describes the situation. That's pretty straightforward. You don't need to understand jargon or work for that company to understand what happened. Just make sure you're on the same page as to what happened. Now you move on to action. So with detail, describe how you handled it. And this is where you can employ the 3-answer method. So I told you about the time I failed. Let me tell you how I handled it. And this could sound like, so after I failed the audit, 3 things happened that were key to my action plan. First, we conducted a team meeting to be sure everyone understood the audit results. Second, we then met with each individual teammate to discuss in detail their current knowledge and also any knowledge gaps they had in the process. And then third, we added real-time inspection points to the process so we can nip any future defects in the bud. So there's where you can really think about the 3-answer method as a sub-part of how the situation, action, and outcome hack can be applied. So now you round it out with that outcome. So I told you about the failure. I told you how I addressed it, how I learned from it and turned it around. Now let me tell you about the outcome. And that could sound like, and I'm happy to say, 8 weeks later, we were audited again. Not only did we pass the audit, but we achieved a result of excellent. So if you prep well and you apply this method, you will reduce your interview nerves and increase your interview confidence. Why? Because you have a much better starting point and a framework on how to answer every type of question that comes your way. I guarantee you, your confidence during the interview will skyrocket. So let me bring this point home. Have you ever been stuck answering an interview question, unsure if you really answered it fully? So you keep talking, hoping the answer is in there somewhere. Well, if you apply this framework hack I've shared with you today, the listener, the interviewer, will actually hear the end of the answer you're trying to convey versus you rambling on. I've seen many candidates get stuck in a loop. So they keep talking because they're unsure if the question was ever answered. So they make it up with a lot of volume, a lot of answers to the question, and they hope somewhere in there they've nailed it enough where the interviewer will move. All right, so we talked about what to do before the interview. We talked about what to do during the interview and how to handle any type of interview question. Now let's talk about what you can do after the interview. Well, first, you can simply follow up with a thank you email. So this follow-up, you should customize it to each person you interviewed with. So if you interview with multiple people, don't send the same email. If there was anything from the interview you can refer back to make it personal or show that you paid attention, include it. Those nuggets are powerful. And if the hiring manager gave you any feedback or homework, refer back to that too. So it really shows you were listening. So what could this email sound like? Dear Mrs. Smith, thank you for taking the time to consider me for the XYZ position in your company. I didn't think it was possible, but after we met, I want the position even more. I also appreciate the advice you gave me during the interview, and I've already begun to apply it. Thanks again, and I hope the Yankees make the World Series. All the best. So now let's talk about resume questions. These are the interview questions that specifically come from the review of your resume. Now, you should be very prepared to answer them, whether it's a positive accomplishment type question or a question that is a bit of a red flag and you need to address it. Now, I will say, if you have the opportunity to address that red flag before being asked, all the better. Beat the manager to the punch by diffusing it. Address a red flag head on. So one red flag could be a gap in employment, where for 3 months on your resume last year, it was clear you didn't work for anybody. So you can wait for the, oh, I see a gap in your employment question, tell me about it. Or you can say in your opening, hey, you'll notice in my resume that I was in a gap of 3 months where I didn't work anywhere. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So either way, you can address it when it comes up, or you can address it prior. But either way, address it positively and say something like, I realized in the prior role I was in that I didn't have a lot of passion for X, and I wanted to switch careers. My real passion was Y, and although I knew I was taking a chance, it was a risk, I believed the time was right for me to chase what I love to do. To me, it's open, it's honest, shares that you've got some passion about something, and you're willing to take some chances. So if you can figure out a way to address that up front, great. But if not, at least be prepared for the question during the interview. Hope that helps. So let's close out the interview section with reviewing homework. Specifically, what questions should you be prepared for? This is a very simple list of questions, and by no means will be the only ones you might get asked during an interview. So one question I asked every time was, what homework did you do to prepare for today's interview? I really wanted to see initiative. I wanted to see you did something more than show up today. And this is a great opportunity for the 3-answer method. Give 3 examples of things you did prior to the interview. Like I did a site visit. Like I chatted with current employees. Like here's my 30, 60, 90-day action plan. Whatever those answers are, be prepared for the homework question. And obviously, more importantly, do your homework. Another question we talked about earlier, but you should have the answer in your back pocket, is tell me about you. Tell me about yourself. This is the quick journey. Talk about school, career, strengths, and something personal. Another question, very straightforward, probably asked in every interview is, why do you want this role? Again, great opportunity for the 3-answer method. No different than why should we pick you? Another good opportunity for the 3-answer method, but beware of that question. It is weak when you talk about very fluffy things like, I'm a self-starter, I'm motivated, I'm a great teammate. Those are answers everyone else probably has. The why we should pick you should be more specific to you. To really think about the 3 powerful reasons why we should pick you for this role. Another question that could come up frequently, it's very direct, it's very honest, is why do you want to leave your current job? And again, good opportunity for the 3-answer method. Now, if you lead teams, you may get a question around their performance. You may get something like, tell me about a time you impacted a team's performance. And this is a great opportunity to talk about the situation, the action, and the outcome framework. Now, you may also deal with customers. So you may be tested during the interview on how you handle an angry customer. And the question may be, tell me about how you handled an angry customer. And this is a great opportunity to again employ the situation, action, and outcome framework to the answer of the question. Now, lastly, and this was a bit of a pet peeve of mine if the answer was, I don't have any for you, but you should be prepared for the question, what questions do you have for me? And again, if you don't have any, doesn't show you're all that interested in the job or the company. So again, good opportunity to prepare with 3 questions for the interviewer. Again, hope that helps. So we talked a lot about interviews today. Now let's wrap it up with the quote of the day. The best preparation for good work tomorrow is to do good work today. That comes to us from Elbert Hubbard. Now, I think that's very simple, but think about it. The more you put in today, the more your confidence will increase tomorrow. I love that quote. I think it really wraps up nicely the theme of today's podcast.
This is the final boarding call.
So what are the top 3 takeaways from today's podcast? Well, first, understand the 3 types of interview questions. Tell me about you, tell me about how, or tell me about a time. Second, master the approach on how to handle each of these questions with either the journey, the 3-answer method, or the situation, action, outcome framework. And then third key takeaway for today, exceed expectations for homework. Really prepare for questions in advance. Do your research on the job and the company. Do site visits or store visits where you can. And if appropriate, write an action plan on what you would do if you got this job like you already had it. And lastly, guys, let's wrap up with our Invest in You suggestion of the week. And my suggestion is pretty straightforward. Practice, but here's how I'd like you to do it. Ask others to fire interview questions your way. Practice identifying what type of question it is. Is it the journey? Is it the how? Or is it the tell me about a time question? And then apply the appropriate hack we reviewed in today's episode. And I'll give you the first practice question now. Why should we hire you? And there's a key here. I really want you to think about how you practice on your friends, not the interviewer. And finally, if you'd like a free review of your resume or a chance to join our mentor network as a mentor or a mentee, or a recap of today's episode along with prior episode recaps, Well, that's our plug to visit our website at www.thecareerjigsaw.com. Well, podcast people, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening in today. If you like what you heard, keep listening, follow us, etc. You know the drill. And also, check out our website at thecareerjigsaw.com. Again, thanks so much for tuning in, and more to come next week. Be safe, all.